All right, so this morning we are starting a discussion on a new topic in our wilderness experience. As Israel is going into the wilderness, before we go into the wilderness, there is some grapes that's there at the door. That Clive went into the Karoo and he went picking some grapes, and there's families can each take a bag so that we can enjoy the goodness of the Karoo in these days. Dankie Clive, waardeer dit. So in these days, we are starting to speak about the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And it's interesting, the tabernacle is quite a big topic in Scripture. And years ago, when we were studying the tabernacle, one night I had a dream. And my dream was I was in a wilderness environment in a very arid, sort of rocky area. And as I came around a corner, I saw the camp of Israel in front of me with the tabernacle in the middle. And it is amazing to me. We were thinking and praying and asking the Father about this. And we know full well that the camp of Israel and everything that it contains is where the life is. You agree? If you're in the wilderness and you're out on your own and you're on foot, there's not a lot of survival. It is within the camp of Israel that the Father shows His grace and His mercy and His provision and His protection and everything that He shows to us. That's where we're experiencing it. So, and in the middle of this camp is the tabernacle. And the experience within the tabernacle is there to facilitate our drawing close to the Father. And a little bit of Eden remains in the middle of Israel, where we can converse with the Father and where we can come and experience His goodness and His mercy and His grace and interact with Him on a daily basis. So, that was for Israel. So where are we? Where's the tabernacle now? We are the tabernacle, remember? The tabernacle has come to us. So the realities that we read, if we read the detail of the tabernacle, as we did this morning, 50 hooks and clamps and sockets and silver and goat hair and whatnot, it should mean something for us. And we should discover what it means and go into the detail of that. And we're not going to spend too much time on the detail this morning, but I want to encourage you, if you find studies on the tabernacle, it is a study about us, our experience, our wilderness experience, and the goodness and the presence of the Father within days and times of difficulty. So that's Terumah. And Terumah, basically, if we just briefly go through the Torah portion, it starts out in chapter 25, verse 1, and it says, make a contribution. That is the word Terumah. It is make a contribution. The first of your offerings, bring the first to the sanctuary. And we know that when Moses asked the nation to contribute, did they contribute? Did they respond? They responded to the measure that he would have to say, stop, don't bring any more. This is it. We've got enough. We've got more than enough. So, and then the next, if we look at the ideas around in this Torah portion discussed in this this scripture portion that we are reading, we see that it starts out with 25 verse 8 that speaks about the resting place of our Father in the midst of Israel. And it lists a number of items. It lists the ark of the covenant, the Aaron. It lists the ark. And remember, the tabernacle always starts with the ark of the covenant. That is, they say in our lives as well. Where does our relationship with our Father start? With a covenantal relationship. And it starts with the evidence of the covenant in your life. And from there on we build the tabernacle of our existence. And so as we go along, we see that it's the ark of the cover, the kaperet, the cover of the ark. And these are the only two items of furnishings that's sitting on top of one another, that touches one another. Because in the presence of our Father, our relationship with Him is so close. We touch His presence. His Ruach, as we prayed and sang this morning, His Ruach dwells within us. He is with us. We touch His presence every day. So and as we go away, further away from the Ark of the Covenant, the distances between the furnishings grows. On the other side of the wall, the curtain of partition, we find the Shulchan, the bread of His presence, on the northern side, and just on the other side of the holy place, we find the menorah. That's a couple of steps apart. And once we go outside, well, the Yereah, the curtains surround all of the holy and the most holy place. And then when you go outside, we find the altar and the bowl, the bowl of washing. They sit in the outer court. So let's just have a quick look at the curtains. Do I have a laser point here today? Yes. The curtains, the Yereah, it says, if we can read there, it says Chamesh. It starts with the word 5, Chamesh. 5 of the Yereot, the sheets, they shall be one's joining. Can you see the word there for joining? It says it's a chet, bet, resh, tav, chavrot. It says the word is chavrot. And let's just have a look at the text and I'll come back to the detail. It says chavrot and then isha. The next word is isha al achota. Sorry, it's achota. No, it's achota. And then it's the word for chamesh, 5 again. The sheets of joining the chavrot. And then again to each one, isha al achota. It's a repetition of a couple of words. Now, what is that if we're looking at the tabernacle at our own life experience? How does that relate to what we're experiencing? Is there anything that we can see? Who are we supposed to be in our experience? Should we be the bride, the one that's betrothed to the Father? I think that's who we are. So if you look at the text there, it's interesting because the one that who are joined is chavrot. It's if you look at the root word, it's chaver, it's friends, those who are drawing close. Okay, so who are joined? The friends are joined. Each one is the word isha. So what is a isha in Hebrew? What is it? It's a woman. It's a woman. It's actually a bride, but it's a woman. That's interesting. So the friends that are joined in the tabernacle is the woman, the bride. Each one to, it says, achutah. So, what is the word for a brother in Hebrew? Do you know? What is the word for brother? Achi. Achi is my brother. Ach is a brother. Achot is a sister. So that's interesting. It speaks about the woman that is joined as friends and sisters. And it mentions it again. So those of the curtains that surrounds the holy and most holy place are firstly female, women, that are joined together in friendship, trusting one another, taking hands, so to speak, because they are joined by the vavim, the hooks, that's joining us together, and they are the sisters, surrounding the presence and the holiest of holy place of the Father. And that's who we are called to be, really, is we are the witnesses, we are the people that surround His presence, we are there to sit close to Him in relationship and to one another. So I thought that's interesting if you read that from that perspective in terms of the curtains. Have you ever seen yourself as a curtain? Maybe not so much. So then we go to the planks, the walls that's made out of gold, and we read it this morning, and the paraket, the veil that is dividing the holy and the most holy place is spoken of in this portion. And then the Mizbeach, the altar of sacrifice, and the outer court. And I think that's that. Oh, and then the courtyard. That's what's been spoken of. What do we miss in this portion? What is not discussed of the furnishings? I think, and this is the emphasis really on this portion. It is, what is that? Yeah, what about the altar of incense? Where is that? There's no altar of incense here. It is the ark, the cover, the table, the menorah. And then we go to the outer court. So the altar of incense is not there. What else is not there? in the outer court? I'll give you a clue. Something in the outer court is missing. The laver. Yes, the laver is missing. So those two items comes later. So if you think about this, what do we do with the laver as we are drawing close to the Father? What are we doing with the laver? We are washing our sacrifice. We are washing the most inner parts so that what we bring is cleansed. And then that's to do with our actions, the way that we are approaching the Father in the way that we are bringing our sacrifice. And on the inner and the holy place, what's missing there? The altar of incense. And what do we do with the altar of incense? From the Mizbeach, from the altar, we bring our incense that we have mixed and made for the use in the tabernacle, and we present it to our Father as prayers. So these are the things that we are bringing close to Him. It'll be discussed next week. All right, so this is just putting the foundation in place of how this place is going to look like. So essentially, if we look at the tabernacle, it is really a place where our Father reveals Himself to us. So if you look at the existence of the tabernacle and the purpose of the thing, it is a place. Where is our Father residing at the moment in the life of Israel? Where was He? His Shekhinah, His dwelling presence, where was He? On the mountain, just next to them, on Mount Sinai. The clouds smoking and everything that's going on the mountain, that's His dwelling presence there. And then from there He's moving down into the tabernacle where He will shachan. Remember that verse, Exodus 25 verse 8 says, what does it say? V'yasuli mikdash v'shechanti betacham. It says, and they will build me a sanctuary and I will dwell in their midst. All right, so two things. They will build me a sanctuary, and as a product of them building me a sanctuary according to my instructions, what will happen? As I will shachan. I will dwell in their midst. So if you look at the makeup of this word shachan, it's quite an interesting word because it's got a couple of elements. Remember, the Hebrew characters does mean something. Everything is a picture. So the letter shin is it's like a fire. So shachan, the first character, is the fire, and the kanav is the wings of a bird. So it is fire, wings of a bird, and a sun. The nun at the end is a sun, nun sofit actually. So what does it mean? What does the dwelling presence of the Father mean? It says that the Spirit will descend like a dove on the Son. So where have we seen this somewhere? Does it sound familiar to you at all? What did we see the presence of our Father, the presence of Adonai in our midst? When have we seen that practically and physically? It was when Yeshua was walking amongst them. So His dwelling presence was with and amongst us. So, all right, so let's go on. That's just interesting. So if we are in the wilderness, how did we get into the wilderness? Can you remember what was the things that were taking place here? Because this week is a dramatic shift from everything that we've experienced in Shemot up to now. Because in Shemot, we started at our Father introducing Himself to Pharaoh and to Egypt. And Pharaoh had a difficult time giving up Israel, and the Father said, let my people go. And they went after 10 plagues. 10 things happened in the life of Egypt before Israel was able to go out and worship Him in the wilderness. And then even in going out, we saw that they came to the Red Sea and a wonder took place. And then afterwards at Marah and with a battle with Amalek, the Father is directly intervening in the presence of Israel to help them to see His goodness, His protection, His mercy, His glory for them. So it is from the focus on the Father's provision and His protection and everything that He's doing from them. And today it's moving over to the tabernacle. So the tabernacle is interesting because it's really interesting on that slide, but it is from 25 to 31 chapters, Exodus 25 to 31. Moses receives the instructions on how it's going to look like, according to the pattern. So for 6 chapters, this is what we see, is the instructions on how to build the thing. And then from chapter 35 to 40 is Israel building it. Okay, so a third of the volume, the third of the size of Shemot, of Exodus, is spent on building instructions and building the tabernacle. So do we think it's important in our lives to have a look at what the tabernacle looks like? I think according to just the time spent and the attention given in Scripture, it appears to be quite important. So Exodus ends with the completion with the tabernacle, where the Spirit of our Father moves from the mountain into the most holy place, and not even Moses can enter the tabernacle. They've built it, it's beautiful, it's there, they can't enter it. And then from Leviticus 1 to 6, we learn about the sacrifices that Israel bring, and 6 to 9 is then the priests' application and processing of and their responsibilities of the sacrifices. And then when it's inaugurated in Leviticus chapter 10, there is a mishap with Nadav and Abihu. But after all, the whole story of the tabernacle, after all the detail and everything that it is, how long was it supposed to function? How long was it initially thought to have a purpose and a function? What's that? Till they enter the promised land. And how long more or less would that be? It's just over a year. Just over a year. Remember, they spent about a year at Mount Sinai, then they went from there to Rephidim, and from Rephidim into the promised land. From there it was quick. So, if only. They spent 40 years carrying this thing around with them. And then after that, when they entered the promised land, where did it go to? To the place that our Father will put His name. Hamakom, you remember? Where was that? Where was that? It was in Shiloh. In Shiloh it functioned for 369 years. Longer than what South Africa is from its establishment. So, was that the place that the Father has put His name? Apparently so, because it was functioning there for 369 years. And it's interesting to me that it first functioned within the tribal area of Ephraim, and then it moved into the tribal area of Benjamin in Yehuda. Right, so, in any case, in Jerusalem. So, 15 times more detail is given to the creation, to the making, to the establishment of the detail of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, than what there is to the creation itself. So is creation less important than the tabernacle in our existence? If it wasn't for creation, we would have had a small problem. So, but in our lives, in our approaching our Father, in seeing what He purposes for our lives and what He wants from us, we need to spend time with the tabernacle. Creation is there. We need to care for it. We've been assigned the overseeing of creation. That's done. But now, as a nation of Israel, they need to find an identity, who they are and where they are going. And that we will find in the building of the tabernacle. But if you look really at where the tabernacle is situated in Scripture, it is towards the end of Shemot. And Shemot is the book of names. It starts out with the names of 70 people coming from Canaan, moving into the promised land, and into Egypt, and now they're there. And within the first chapter, second paragraph, it starts with the story of Moshe, of this young man that's going to take them from Egypt. And it's really the establishment of a nation. It comes from the birth of the nation, 12 tribes, a family moving into Egypt, and a nation that is coming to Sinai. And if you and I probably would have written Scripture and grouped these things together that it makes some sort of sense, and in an order that we can find the things, I would have probably made a decision to spend Shemot on the establishment of a nation, on the Exodus from Egypt to Sinai, sort this lot and say, that is Shemot, it's Exodus, we're coming out from Egypt. And in Vayikra, in Leviticus, we established a place of worship and how to function in the place of worship. So if you want to know what to do in the holy place, then go to Vayikra. If you know how it looks like, go to Vayikra, but only not. The Father decided to put it in Shemot. So, what is then the connection? Then the connection to Shemot is interesting and important for us. Because if it is there, it serves a great purpose. And we need to understand it. So to understand where we are, we need to begin at Genesis with the creation. Because Adam and Chava started the whole story. And Haneli and I listened this morning to something that says, when they sinned, who were they ashamed of? Suddenly they realized they're naked. And shame came in. What happened? Who were they ashamed of? Were they ashamed of each other? They weren't, because they were hiding together from the Father. So now, the shame that engulfed them, and they were expelled. They lost the clothing of light. It's interesting if we think about all of these concepts. Maybe I'll speak about it a little bit next week. So from Adam and Chava and their roles in creation, we went on to Noah, that humanity was judged, and that you know what happened in the time of Noah. And then it starts with the story of a family in Abraham. And the family grew in Abraham to Isaac, to Jacob, and Jacob moving down to Egypt because of circumstances that the father has planned. And we find in Egypt, as we said, 12 tribes. It's not a nation, it's a family, 12 tribes sitting in Egypt. And we are introduced to those guys in the beginning of Shemot. And then as it goes on, after the plagues, they've been delivered, and there's a couple of guys that joins them, the mixed multitudes. It's called the Erev Rav. They join Israel in coming out of Egypt, and they go into the wilderness together. The 12 tribes and the Erev Rav. Okay? But it's only at Sinai that they become a nation. So the book of Shemot is really spending time in establishing the tribes, the family of Israel, to become the nation of Israel. The identity, all the people that joined them, everybody together is now the nation of Israel. So if you think about Israel back in Egypt, what united them? What was the unifying factor there? What do you think? Slavery, yes, I think common enemy. That is one of the biggest things that joins a people group, is difficult days. And if we think about that, we can maybe think about the future a little bit. Why is the world going into difficult days, and why tribulation will come, and why all these things will happen? Is so that we can sort out what's important and what's not. Alright, so I think what united them is their ancestry. They are the sons of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And they are grouped together, and they're in slavery, so they join their hearts together, and they cry out for release and redemption to our Father. Our Father reaches down and He brings them out. Great! They're united. Were they united? What do you think? There were sort of problems in the camp of Israel, or were they completely united, functioning as one, doing the thing? They needed a little bit of pressure. The Father's good at giving that. So, the problem is, remember the call, let my people go. For what purpose? To go 3 days into the wilderness and worship me. That's what's been said. That was the purpose. Alright? To worship the Father, that's the purpose of Israel. Do you agree? Is that the only purpose of Israel? How are we going to worship Him? What does it mean to worship the Father? What does it mean to live in His presence? And what's our role in society? Because remember, we're slaves as they came out of Egypt. So what is the character? And we see the character of these guys. We see the character of slaves as they come out. So in Egypt for a couple of hundred years. I think it's just a little bit more than 200 years. They were sitting in Egypt and they were going backwards and to difficult days, and they developed a mindset. They developed the character of deprived slaves, deprived people. And it's difficult for them to come out of that mentality of being slaves. Because you know what people that's deprived, what they do, is they look for others to provide and care for them. They never take responsibility for themselves. If there's heartache, if there's difficulty, if there is things that upset them, what do? They always blame the people that should take care of them. And this is what Israel was doing. They don't take responsibility for their own situation. And we even see it in this day, even. If you look at people groups that are experiencing difficult things, the same things will happen there. Because we remain children. Think about children. They look for others to provide and take care of them. Is that true about children? Definitely. They don't take responsibility for their own situation. They most often don't. They easily complain when their needs are not met. I think that remains true. We saw that in Israel's life. We see that in the lives of slaves. We see that in the lives of people groups that are under pressure and going through difficult things. And we see it in children. Because our call is to let the things that we... Remember last week's teaching? Do you remember last week the type of love that we can embrace? Echev. It is what's in it for me. What do I get out of this whole deal? And that's what children does. Children says, I need to get something out of this. You know? And maturity in our Father, growing into mature people, is letting that selfish love go, putting it down, and picking up the strength and the love of our Father, of Messiah, that takes care of other people. Take responsibility in the situation. Be innovative. Care for one another. You know? That's what mature people do. But this was a generation that had slave mentalities. So, think of a couple of examples. Exodus 5:21 is, the setting is Moses and Aaron is fired up. Maybe that's a wrong choice of words. Aaron and Moses is motivated. They spoke to Pharaoh. They said, let my people go. This is the things that the Father said, let us go 3 days into the wilderness to worship Him. Pharaoh isn't too positive about the situation. He says, what I will do in response is I won't provide straw. Now Israel will have to provide their own straw and produce the same amount of bricks. Remember, they were building contractors initially that was deprived over time, not receiving any money, heavily taxed to the point of being slaves. And in this portion of Scripture, 5:21, they say, Aaron and Moses, what have you done? You've brought us to the place where the hand of Pharaoh is against us. You've given a reason for these Egyptians to take up sword against us, and now we're in trouble. But they do, at the end, after the 10th plague, they leave Egypt with a high hand. And the high hand is a sign of pride. It is not by grace, through compassion and thankfulness of what the Father is doing. There's a sense of a little bit of pride and arrogance in there. The high hand is, and we see the high hand today if people are getting together in rebellion and in sort of things where they want to make themselves known. And which is not really the character and the sign that the Father would like there. And then at the Red Sea, Israel found themselves at the border of the Red Sea, on the beach. They were really between the Egyptians and the Deep Blue Sea. Let's just call it that. Okay? So they were standing in panic and they were crying out to Moses and saying, wasn't there enough graves in Egypt? Why didn't you leave us at the pots of flesh in Egypt so that we could live and die to the Egyptians? Why have you brought us into the wilderness? And so they cried out in that scripture, they cried out to our Father for deliverance. And then, only then, the column of fire moved from front of them to behind them for protection. Moses stuck out his staff. He was crying out to the Father. The Father said, "Stop crying out to me. Stop calling for me for help. Raise your staff." When Moses did so, did the sea open up? No. For the whole night, it says, he raised his staff. The next morning, a wind came, and the next morning, the ocean or the sea was open. So we need a little bit of faith there. Moses had to raise his hands a couple of times for a long period of time. So, and then the nation goes through, and Egypt followed. Things didn't go well. And what happened then? After the Red Sea, they feared our Father, and they believed Moses, his servant. A recognition of his deliverance, our Father's deliverance, and Moses being a true leader, following that they can follow and that they can listen to, and that will provide, protect, and all the rest. Okay? Good. For how long? The problem is, 3 days later in Exodus 16:3, they complain. 3 days later, after the Red Sea, they are in rebellion. So, my question is, what did the miracles do for their faith? They witnessed the most spectacular miracles any generation living on this planet has ever seen. What did it do for their faith? Did it bind them together? Did it cause them to grow up, to act responsibly? Did the miracles do anything for them? So the Father intervenes personally. He decides, what I'm going to do is, Exodus 19:18. Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it, because Adonai descended upon it in fire. Think about this. The presence of Adonai comes and sits on the mountain. No generation has ever seen this. And its smoke went up like a smoke of a furnace, and the mountain trembled exceedingly. And as the Father spoke the words in Exodus 20, the syllables rolled off the mountain, and it broke the cedars, and the earth shook, and the animals gave birth spontaneously. It was amazing. 19:19 says, and when the blast of the ram's horn sounded long and became louder and louder, Moses spoke, and Elohim answered him by voice. Does that reinforce the fearing of Adonai and listening to Moses that they had a couple of days earlier? It does. So that's good, but boy. So, how did it change their hearts? What did it do? It did nothing. Because 40 days later, they had a golden calf. Can you believe it? How is this possible? You know what? And this is not a criticism on our spiritual experience, but the whole of the Christian world cries out for revelation. No, not for revelation. For what is it? Herlewing. What's that now? That's the word. Revival. Revelation, revival. You said tomato, I said tomato. It's more, it goes hand in hand. But the whole world cries out for revival. What is our concept of revival? What does it denote? It is the presence of Adonai that comes on a people group, and miraculous power is displayed, and healings and things that takes place. The Father is known to the group of people. Is it going to change our hearts? Look at Israel. Is it going to do anything for our maturity, our acting responsibly, following in obedience? Nothing. None of the revivals that we saw in modern humanity, in modern Christianity, has ever done anything as far as that's concerned. So, if you think about that, what greater miracle is there that the Father could have done? So the Father is every time that Israel does something, the Father comes and He gives a greater revelation of Himself. So, the question is, the Father wants to transform them. He wants them to become the people, the Israel that He has called them to be. What is the Israel to do in the nations? What is Israel's function and purpose in the nation? In the nations? To be the priests unto the nations, yes. So what they need to do is to sacrifice themselves, to lay their lives down before the Father, be obedient to His voice, act responsibly, and to be a witness of His greatness, His goodness, His mercy, His awesome being to the rest of the world. So, but what is going to transform them? So, because remember, Israel is the nation. They're not a nation. They are the called out nation that the Father has set apart to be His priests to the world. Okay, so there is something that needs to take place. Because this is metamorphosis, and it's interesting about this process that the Father has created, is it starts with a butterfly laying an egg. And as the egg sort of hatches, that's the word. Thank you, Roddy. Man, it's lovely to have some. I'm going to miss you there. Anyways, so as it hatches, a worm is sort of brought into being. And the worm eats up everything. Sort of destructive thing. What needs to happen to the worm? The worm goes away and it turns into a pod, I think is the right English word. Papie klink nogal snaaks in Afrikaans, né? Anyways, so, and from a pod it grows into this beautiful butterfly. So transformation needs to take place in every stage of life to come from the place of being an egg or a worm or a pod to become a butterfly. So do we celebrate, if you go into your garden, do we celebrate it if we see a pod? Wow, look at this beautiful pod. Or there's an egg. But if there's a butterfly flying around, we can appreciate the colors and the beauty that the Father has given to us. So what do we need to be? Do we need to be worms or pods or even totally dormant like an egg? You know, we need to be butterflies. We need to be changed and transformed into the image that the Father wants to show us and to experience in this world. How is Israel going to get there? Have you got any clues to that matter? What do you think? Low. Well, it's a process. Yes, it is a process. And maturity is a process of growing into the image of Messiah. But in our text today, in the wilderness experience, how are we going to get from A to B? What we're going to do is Terumah is this portion today. And Adonai spoke to Moshe saying, "Speak to the children of Israel that they take up a contribution for me. From anyone whose heart moves him, you shall take up my contribution." And then if you follow down, it says, the reason for this contribution is they shall make me a set-apart place and I will dwell in their midst. So, with Israel receiving this revelation and taking up the responsibility of this building project, did they do so eagerly and enthusiastically? They brought everything that they possibly could, up to the point where Moses said, enough, enough. So, when Israel became givers, when they became builders, they started to focus on something else than their own slavery, their own situation, their own appetites, because at that stage they were eating manna and water. Manna and water, manna and water. Who's been on a diet here? Ever? Okay, don't put up your hands. If you've ever been on a diet, who gets sick of the same food over and over for an extended period of time? You think? Manna and water, 40 years. Manna was apparently lovely to eat. So, every day. So, but the way that Israel is transformed is to become givers and builders and not focus on themselves, but focus on your Bierman, on the one next to you, to build in value into the life of the person next door, and to focus on a communal project. So, you know what was the result? From Exodus 35, when the thing was built, from the beginning of the building of this project, because just before Exodus 35, we will ignore for now. What happened in Exodus 33, 34? The golden calf. But remember, the instructions were given before. They didn't act on it. That was given to Moses on the mountain, and they only started in Exodus 35 for the building project. From the starting of the building of the project to the end of it, there was no negative word. There was no negative word. There was no rebellion, no complaint. This is a surprise to me as well. My wife does the artwork. And I say, thank you. And I enjoy it too. I never see it before I come here. So it's interesting, because the moment that they started focusing on the building of the tabernacle, the rebellious hearts changed. The complaints went away. No negative response. Isn't it amazing that the presence of the Father, His wonder-working, miraculous power displayed, couldn't change their hearts? It's only taking responsibility on what they want to do. So, and out of this, from this time forward, at Sinai, when they were building the Mishkan, and they went forward, what were they known as? Israel. The Erev Rav, the 12 tribes, were united as a nation, so that they become singular, united nation, Israel. And from here on forward, yes, lots of rebellions, lots of tests, lots of things. But in the period that they were focusing on what was happening, there was no problems. So if we think about the building project and how important it is, there's a principle there. And I think the principle is applicable in our lives as well. If we are looking for what the Father can do for us, and His provision for us, and that sums up, or that is the voorwaarde. What's a voorwaarde now? A condition. I found it before you. The condition of our relationship. Sien jy raak stadig, Radie? So, if that is, I'm growing up. So, if that's the condition of our relationship, we're going to fail every time. This is what it is. And Israel have shown that over and over. So, it is what we do in response to His calling. It's our reaction, our response to His calling and what He does for us that shows if we are going to grow up, if we're going to mature, what is going to happen in our lives. And this is the transitional phase from being slaves to becoming citizens of the kingdom. So how does it work for us? Are we in a tabernacle building project? Are we involved in a project building tabernacles at the moment? Are we? Yep. We should. We should. I just remember while I'm talking, many moons ago, I had this little oinkie. Cookie was her name. She was this cute Jack Russell. And, it was Maximus. It was Maximus Unflardus de Jager. My little Dachshund had a beautiful name. His name is Maximus Unflardus de Jager. Because he was this big, but he had this big personality. Maximus. And everything that he found, it became Unflardus. He just tore everything, a paper, he just tore everything up. And if he couldn't tear anything up, he would chase everything down, and from there the de Jager came. So, and one night I was praying. He had a skin condition. He was itching and he was suffering. The little man was really suffering. And one night I was asking the Father, and I was saying, you know what, I'm praying for this little dog every day for him to recover and to get healing of this terrible condition. And he died with the condition. And can't do anything about it. What's going on? What's the problem with me? There's a problem with me here. Because, And I saw a picture of the tabernacle. But the problem is, the sheets, the courtyard sheets is flapping in the wind. It's not secured. There's portions of my tabernacle missing. I can't see it. And the Father says, you know what? Is my presence, my Shekhinah, my dwelling presence, where the power is, really becomes noticeable and effect in your life when your tabernacle is functioning. Tabernacle is not what it should be, because you're withholding areas of your life that you don't submit to me. So, if you're thinking about if we are missing the presence, the power, the closeness of our Father, I think our building projects might have become dormant. So we should take up the shovel, and we should start getting busy in repairing, in restoration, and building what the Father, the character and the image that the Father wants to have in our lives. So there's a sanctuary. Remember it says, V'yashula mikdash, v'shachanti betocham. The shachanti, it says, a sanctuary that I will dwell. It's a mikdash and a shachanti. So the mikdash is the sanctuary where the Father will dwell in our midst. So what is the sanctuary? It's a place of refuge. The Webster actually says it is a place of refuge, but another aspect of it, it is functioning a specific purpose. It is a place where it is so set apart that one purpose for it functions only. Okay? So, the Father says, build me a sanctuary in your life. A place where you can go to, that we can commune, and where I can dwell with you and tell you what needs to happen. So, the initial intent, as far as I understand it, of the Father in the lives of Israel was to dwell in their midst. Is betocham, I will dwell in their midst. So if the Father says, build me a sanctuary that I can dwell in your midst, it's interesting that they built him a sanctuary. He dwelled in the center of the camp, but they couldn't enter. If we are building the Father a sanctuary in our lives, and His presence resides in our lives, then He is dwelling in my midst. But in the lives of Israel, He gave us a physical picture that helps us to understand this concept. And before they didn't get into the worship structure, into the bringing of the offerings, into honor Him and to live according to the protocols that He set in place, the worship within the tabernacle couldn't take place. They couldn't enter. They couldn't be with Him. So, I think an important point here is, did our Father really needed the tabernacle to live? He lives everywhere. Whose purpose did it serve? It served Israel's purpose, because it gave them a place where they can establish a small Eden in their midst, where the Father can come and He is set apart. It's a set apart place that our normal tainted things that we do every day doesn't influence that area or space. So the Father can reside there, and we can go to that place so that we can worship Him in spirit and in truth. It is for the benefit and the purpose of Israel, not for our Father, that this place was created. And so in our lives too. It is for the purposes that we can have the dwelling presence of the Father with us every day. So what elements did we read this morning about? What elements did they bring? In overflow. What elements was it? We've got a list, but we don't know what it is. We know it's gold and silver and bronze and linen and fine linen and goat skins and all of that. So what? What does it mean? And I think this our challenge throughout the year is, and if you go and read in commentaries, if you read 3 commentaries, you've got 4 opinions. That's what it is. Nobody really agrees on it. But in the Midrash Hagadol, there is a commentary in the in the experience of Israel for thousands of years, where they say what they thought it meant. And maybe we can learn something from there. So let's think. Gold symbolized the soul, the silver of the body. The copper was the voice. And it's interesting at the Mizbeach, everything that fire was added, it was apart from the one in the holy place. It's where we speak, you know. So if you bring your little lamb, if you bring a sacrifice, what do? We approach the Father and the smoke rises before Him. It's like a prayer that we raise before Him. So copper is the voice, blue is the veins, purple the flesh, red the blood, fine linen is your insides. That's what is sacred. That's where the hidden parts are. So if you are walking in Torah, our actions display the works of Torah. Wonderful. What does your intentions and your heart do? Does that align with what's going on the outside? Or are we doing it out of religious sort of behavior? So the fine linen, the white stuff, reflects what's going on the inside. Because remember that the fine white linen curtain, where was that functioning? In the tabernacle. Where was that? Can you remember? Because remember, if you go into the holy place, into the most holies, what do you see? If you're in the most holy place, what do you see around you? Gold. You see a gold reflection in the wall panels. What do you see behind you if you're looking towards the Aron, the Ark of the Covenant? Behind you is a curtain. What color is the curtain? It's purple, blue, and red. Those four colors, those four prominent colors. Because it's embroidered with two angels, two seraphim on it. Where is the white? It's right on the outside. The peripheral is white. And in the holy place there's four curtains and the innermost one is white. So that's why in your insides, your intestines, it shows your works on the outside, on the courtyard, and it shows the intentions of your heart on the inside. It's a reflection. The one is a reflection of the other. So, ram skins dyed is red. In red is supposed to be your face. Tachash, where we don't know, our translation this morning translated it into dolphin skins, where I don't know where they got it. But it's all badger skin. We don't really know what it is. It says I understood it to be the scalp. The shittim wood is your bones, the doringhout, it's your bones. Oil for the light represents your eyes. I'm sorry, it came over there. Oil for the light represents your eyes. So even if that's not, the detail is not accurate, because that's just a commentary. What does it say? What does it mean? What is this? What is the symbolism of the tabernacle? What does it show? The spices for anointing oil and the sweet incense is there so that you can discern, that you can smell it with your nose and that you can taste it with your mouth. And the stones listed, remember there are onyx stones and all sorts of beautiful stones. It represents your kidneys. Now it's not kidney stones, remember that's painful apparently. The stones there is because your kidneys and your heart was where your soul dwelled. That is where the innermost intentions and attitudes and things were at. That's why the kidneys and the heart is linked there. So the beautiful stones, the gems are within your heart and your kidneys. All right. So if you are giving these elements, what is it saying? You're giving your total life. The tabernacle, if we are constructing the tabernacle, it is giving a complete existence on this planet. That's what we're doing. So, if we are lifting up, as Moses has asked the nation to do, every guy with a willing heart, bring a terumah. What are we bringing? Your whole being. Everything you've got. That's what you bring. Why do we bring it there? What are we doing here? Why are we bringing it? Why are we bringing it? For the building of the kingdom in each other's lives. Of a showing of of my gratitude and my love towards the Father. I'm bringing it because He chose me before I chose Him. I'm bringing it to the Father for His glory and honor. What do I get out of it? What do I get out of it? What should I get out of it? Because, this is a contract. I give something, He gives me something. What do I get out of it? Why do I do this? You're bringing yourself because you realize His love. He's showing His love towards you. And we're experiencing His love, and we're in a covenantal relationship. That's what we get out of it. Bringing tithes and offerings to where you offer it, wherever you offer it, if you're bringing it to this place or any other place, it is not a physical investment that I can expect a return. I'm depositing 10 rand, and remember, I can reap 100-fold. I'm expecting $1,000. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It doesn't work like that. Terumah means I give my whole life, everything that I have. Remember that Romans 12 thing that says, I lay myself down on the altar every day as a living sacrifice? This speaks to that. So let's just think, there's a couple of scriptures. Look at what's the common point here. But to all who did receive Him, to those who believed in His name, He gave the right to become the children of Elohim. Romans 8 says, for all who are led by the Spirit of God are the sons of God. Who are the sons of Elohim, the sons of God? Who are they? All of us. The ones that are led by His Spirit. If you're in a covenantal relationship, by accepting Messiah as your Redeemer, your Messiah, your Deliverer, and you're following Him because He's the door into the kingdom. Now you're in the kingdom, and you're following Him. You're walking in His ways. His character is built in your life, and you lay down your life continuously and picking up His life so that we can encourage one another and love one another in the way that He said we should. Then we are the sons of God. Do you agree? Romans 8:19 says, the creation waits in Now there's a problem there. 8:14 gives us the good news. It says, for everybody who confesses Messiah as the Deliverer, who worships our Father in spirit and in truth, they are the sons of God. You agree? Still agree? Verse 19 says, at the end of days, this speaks to the end of days, the creation waits in eager expectation for the revelation of the sons of God. So, what does it say? How many of those guys are around in these days? If creation eagerly awaits, in eager expectation, the revelation, it's because our tent flaps are dangling in the wind, and we are an incomplete tabernacle. And today is a call to re-engage our building process, our construction process of our tabernacles, so that the glory of the Father can really and properly reside in our midst. So, how are we transformed? Terumah. Exodus 25 verse 1 says, by giving of ourselves. Everything that the Father has given you in grace and in mercy, and all the goodness that He has invested in your life, it is for the purpose of the kingdom. If you claim it for yourself, you're missing it. When we surrender our will to His and we live in His strength, and remember last week's teaching? Then we are becoming transformed. If we're holding on to the mentality of a child, the mentality of a slave, then we are not in the process of transformation. We are resisting change. We are resisting the transformation that the Father wants. Where in Galatians is it that it's speaking about a pedagogue? Galatians 4, 5, 6, thereabouts. It says, when a child is still immature and is small, is regarded as a slave. And he receives a teacher, a pedagogue, that will take him through the steps and the phases of life to help him to grow up, so that when he is grown up and he takes responsibility of his life then he can take up the responsibility of an heir. But when a child is small and he cannot take the responsibility, then he still acted more or less in the status of a slave. And we shouldn't think of slaves the way that the world does. We should think of slaves the way that our Father does. Sits at his table, he takes care of us, but we haven't got any responsibility or authority. Okay, so if we do number 2, we will immediately have number 3. If we surrender our will to His, we will take responsibility for one another, encourage one another, and help one another. If we refrain to do so, if those things are not part of our lives, we haven't done number 2. It's a checklist. So, on whom does the Father shechan? On whom does the Spirit descend like a dove? What about those sons? What about these sons? These sons. Does the Spirit live in us like he was physically shown to descend on Messiah? He should, and He does. The Spirit of our Father resides within us. And He equips us, and He encourages us, and He leads us to walk down this path of obedience, of giving of ourselves, making ourselves less so that He can become more, so that the Spirit will manifest Himself on us as His sons. So, remember last week, I asked, I gave you homework, and I said, go and think about this. How is the Father's power seen most in your life? How is His power seen most in our lives? Remember the context of last week's story? Is that different types of love that Hebrew speaks about, and Echev is a type of love that is, what is in it for me? Remember? Immature love. The love that sort of reflexive, that I say, I need to have something of this. If we are prepared to lay this down, if we are saying that is immature childish love, if we are putting this away from our lives and we start to live for someone else, we are taking up the strength and the power of Messiah in our lives. Then we will encourage and help and motivate and empathize and everything else for each other for your benefit. Is that the way that our power is seen, that His power is seen in our lives? To what extent? If we don't do that, we are having quite a little bit of the qualities of a child. And the Father wants to motivate us, that we will grow out of it. So, today's question is, how's it going with our community project, with building the tabernacle in each other's lives? Because it is a community project. We should encourage one another, we should be there for one another, we should help one another, we should motivate one another, so that the Mishkan, the tabernacle in your life and in my life, doesn't stay dormant, that it is not maintained, that the bushes don't start to grow up in it, that the fire of the altar keeps on being there. How's that going? If we can engage and trust the Father, not to look at the things that the world does and what they are going through, and don't get distracted to that, but focus on what the Father is doing in your life, we will be transformed. That's what happens. The last question is, how do we limit His power in our lives today? What are we hanging on to? What are we hanging on to in your life and my life that limit His power in my life today? That's between you and our Father, but it is a serious question. It's a question that shows the path forward. It shows the path forward. And I think the path forward leads to a little bit of turnaround sometimes, teshuvah. Making a turnaround and asking your Father for forgiveness, saying that I will run back to the source of life, the source of what you have provided for me, and help me to not take that turn off again. Because every one of us has got a tendency to embrace certain things that causes a distraction in our own lives. And we should get away from that. Are we going to break up into small groups? Are we? I think you should take this question home. I think what we should do is to take these questions home and think about it and pray about it. Because it is this community, each member of this, for us, this is the community. That we can motivate one another. Because we have got a ministry, 1 Corinthians says, we've got a ministry of reconciliation. Remember? Messiah has the ministry of reconciliation, and He gave it to us, to you and I. And each one of us should reconcile ourselves to our Father through Messiah, through the laying down of our lives, and picking up His strength, and walking in His power and His revelation. But in so doing, we shouldn't be focused innerly only to yourself, but you should be focused on the person next to you. Because it is out of our displaying of love to one another that our love to our Father is shown in your life. So Father, today as a community we are asking you to help us. To help us to see the condition of our own tabernacles. If you're looking at the experience of Israel, their wilderness experience, Father, it was when they were looking at their own provision or the lack thereof, looking at the things in the world that was important to them. Those were the days when they were testing you, when they rebelled against you, when they were complaining, when they were worried. But Father, the moment that they started with the building of the tabernacle, their eyes were focused on you, and their hearts were set upon you, and they knew that there's a phase of their lives where they can commune with you directly. Father, help us to be focused on growing and establishing our relationship together with you and with our fellow believers as good as possible. To take out the stumbling stones, to open every door that is leading to a hidden place in our own lives, and to empty that out and lay it before you, Father. Help us to see the ways that we are limiting you in our lives so that we can deal with that and that we can invite you to every hook and cranny and every little corner of our lives, and so that your goodness and mercy will be evident and shown, that your Shekhinah, your dwelling presence, will be strong in our lives. And in so doing and walking our ways with you, revival will come. We will be revived because we are functioning in your presence the way that you want us to. Thank you, Father, that you've given us an Aaron, an Ark of the Covenant in each one of our lives, because we've got a covenantal relationship with you. And the evidence of that is within the Aaron, with the 2 tablets of stone that says how we should function in your presence. It's got the evidence of the Ruach, the budding rod of Aaron there. It's got the bowl of manna, your provision, the living bread, in this covenant relationship. Thank you that you've provided everything for us, Father. Help us to take responsibility over our own lives, and so that we can engage and make sure that our tabernacles are built the way you want them to be. We thank you and we praise you. We worship you, Father. Amen.